Hello and welcome to this edition of Beacon Hill Report. Joining us today is State Representative Paul Schmid from the 8th Bristol District. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Jim.
How are you?
I'm great. This morning, as it happens, there was actually a little bit of sunlight, so
I know.
We were happy with that. Yeah, it's all good.
A lot going on in Beacon Hill right now as we get into the late spring, early summer months here as the time goes on. As you and I were talking about off camera, have the distinct pleasure of being the only representative who represents both New Bedford and Fall River. Plus you also have Freetown and Westport, and I mean, so your district is just the gamut of rural America and urban life.
Well, I'm pretty lucky. It's a remarkable district, and so far as I know, nobody's told me that I'm wrong. I think I'm the first rep to represent both New Bedford and Fall River. Here in New Bedford, I represent the Way North End, up around Sassaquin Pond, down Phillips and Church, Tarkland Hill, and over to the airport.
But as you said too, and I know that your colleagues that represent communities, other communities, I mean, even if you represent one precinct, that changes your perspective because you really represent the whole city or whole town, whatever it may be.
Well, that's right. I only have 3 precincts in New Bedford, but New Bedford is very much part of what I think about, and I love having the opportunity to poke my nose into many things that happen in New Bedford.
And the dynamics of it, fishing, I mean, you've got to get up to speed on fishing issues, but you're also doing the agriculture issues and, you know, wind energy, I know the big thing right now for both Fall River and New Bedford.
Yeah, and historic preservation, which is so important here in New Bedford and also in Fall River.
So it just makes it for a challenge.
Yeah.
Lots of things going on. You are the vice chair of the Joint Committee on Revenue.
Yes.
And obviously the budget just came out for the Senate.
The House has done it.
House has done it, right? The Senate just came out with theirs, I think, like a week ago or so.
That's right.
And I know revenues are always a topic of discussion, but from what I've read, it doesn't seem as like the revenue right now is something that the legislature or the governor really are looking at right now. You want to deal with what you've got as far as taxes I'm talking about. Yeah. So you're looking at just what you're dealing with now as far as your basic revenue. Yeah,
well, we have new revenues coming on stream thanks to cannabis and thanks to casino. The Encore in Everett should be opening, what, next month?
Yeah, I saw it could be a couple weeks late, but it should be next month.
Yep.
About there, yeah.
And that'll be an important source of new revenues. So we do have new revenues coming on stream. Of course, the big one that both the House and the Senate are starting to talk about is the so-called fair share, the extra 4% tax on incomes of over $1 million.
And so what are your thoughts on that? Because I know a lot of it was defeated the last time.
Well, it actually, there was a citizen's ballot,
right,
which at the very last minute was ruled by the Supreme Judicial Court as being invalid.
Right.
And so the folks proposing this had to go back to square one.
And they're hoping to get on, I think, what, 2021?
2022.
2022.
Yeah, 2022, because it takes 2 full sessions to advance a change to the Constitution. And that's what if we want to have any change in the income tax percentage, it has to be done through the Constitution of the Commonwealth.
It's interesting because revenues in general, I think, from what I'm seeing, are up in the state right now.
Yeah, we had a pretty good
last couple months, I should say.
Yep, although everybody who really understands what's going on says that yeah, but a bunch of the increase was not of a reoccurring type. Maybe one-time revenues, people adjusting to the new tax code, people who maybe had a good year last year. So don't expect that increase to continue. And the budget that the House has created and that the Senate will create includes a pretty moderate increase in overall taxation for 2020.
Is it a balancing act between you say you get extra revenue, or you get more than you expect, or better than hope? You want to put it in the rainy day. You talk about rainy day funds too.
Amen. Yeah.
But there are also those outside forces that want to spend that money.
Sure.
What is is there a philosophy, I guess, that you can say the House has in general, I'm talking about, that says, no, we have to save, versus, no, I mean, what's the criteria for spending that money versus putting it in the rainy day fund?
Yeah. Well, number one, revenues which are received through capital gains taxes, revenues received over $1 billion from capital gains taxes by law have to go into the rainy day fund.
Okay.
So some of this increase that we've experienced automatically goes to the rainy day fund, which is a good thing. I think we can all remember 10 years ago when we went into a free fall. Thankfully, the state had one of the largest rainy day funds, and we were able to offset some of the decreases, some, not all, in tax inflows, and we're able to maintain money coming to New Bedford for state and for education purposes. But we need that rainy day fund. Now, as to funds that aren't automatically allocated there, yeah, there will be many people arguing that we need more money for education.
Yep.
We need more money for police and fire, for all the wonderful things that we'd like to do if money grew on trees. Others will say, wait, these good times won't continue forever. We will turn down, and we'll need that rainy day fund. Just as when you're sitting around your kitchen table, hey, wait a minute, you get an increase in pay, don't spend it all. Put some of it aside.
Right. The interesting thing too is that, as you did say 10 years ago, I mean, that rainy day fund was really critical in keeping, I don't want to say the state afloat, but it just to maintain what the state had built up. Sure. As far as services go. And I think that's like you said, it's a good example of just smart budgeting.
Sure. And we'll need it again. The economy goes like this.
Yeah.
We're right up here now. It won't continue forever.
For taxes, and I know we've talked, for example, they've talked about a gas tax. They've talked about tax on junk food, or any number of topics. Is the appetite there for those things right now, do you think? And I'm generalizing now.
Sure. So I think in Massachusetts, the legislators are pretty aware that working people are not in a position to pay more in taxes. So we try very hard to stay away from that reflex of we need more money, tax more. Yeah, there's a reluctance.
Yeah.
There's a
I know
reluctance.
when Rep. Hendricks was in talking about this, we talked about the gas tax for an example, and it's different when you're a representative, and as you and I were talking about off camera, when you're not inside Boston, it's a different world, because the people in Acushnet, in his case, and in your case, Westport or whatever, a gas tax, people who are working in the Boston area, that's a lot of money.
That's right.
It's a lot of gas.
That's right. People up in Boston have the tea to get to work.
Right.
God bless them. We don't have such, although we're hopeful that we will have commuter rail connection to Boston by 2022, but we don't have it yet. So people really rely on their automobiles down here, and any increase in the gas tax hits people in the pocket.
Right, and your thought process as a representative of those areas is different than, say, the thought process perhaps of those in and around Boston.
Sure. Yeah. Greater Boston has its own set of issues, but they have wonderful resources that we don't have down here. So we're oftentimes butting heads a little bit in a respectful way.
Do you find that the representatives, for example, say in Western Mass or in Worcester, are they in the same boat as representatives, say, of New Bedford or Fall River or even the Cape or something like that? Are you guys more together than people might understand?
Oh, very much so. The issues of transportation, talking about the RTAs, the Regional Transportation Authorities. I mean, CERTA down here, the Worcester bus lines, the Springfield bus lines. We all feel that we don't get anywhere near as much funds for our bus service as what the state spends on the T up in Boston. That's a constant source of friction. We had to fight like hell this term to increase the state's commitment to the regional transportation authorities from 88 million to 90 million.
Well, I saw that there was an article in the paper not that long ago about, in general, the regional transit authorities, and yeah, I mean, they're looking at, you know, bus service, weekend bus service is a huge deal because the monies just aren't there.
That's right, or extending buses after 6 p.m.
Right.
So we and Springfield and Lawrence Lowell are very much united on the issue of regional transportation, for instance.
You talked about Commuter Rail, and I know it seems to be inching along slowly. Are you optimistic that it will happen by 2022, thereabouts?
Jim, I am. Yeah, and I know that folks have been listening to people saying that they were optimistic about it for 25 years.
Right.
But this time, all the permits are in place. Funding, work has been going on for 3 or 4 years, improving the rail lines. And I think there's $100 million in next year's capital budget. So yes, I am optimistic that by 2022 we will be able to, both from New Bedford and Fall River, ride a commuter rail line through Middleborough up to Boston.
Are you okay with the Middleborough route as an alternative?
Sure. Compared to what? Compared to no service? Absolutely. Is it the best? No. But let's start with that. And let's show the great ridership that we're going to get from it so that we can justify a more direct route up through the Hockomock swamp.
So
yeah,
that's a good point. I mean, in some ways, it's almost like a proving ground to do it this way, because obviously there are so many communities that are against the Hockomock route. But if this area proves, in a sense, that the ridership is there, then the state might have a different take on it.
Yeah, and you know, I was just reading about the Worcester rail line between Worcester and Boston. Their ridership has gone up 50% in the last 6 years. If we build it, people will use it.
Well, I mean, the buses seem to be, and obviously, you know, my take is just from New Bedford's perspective as far as the bus goes, but the buses seem to always be pretty full. And I would assume it's like that in Fall River, too.
Yes, yes, they are.
And it's a long drive.
It's a long drive, subject to the same backups. So,
you know, I took a bus up not that long ago. Left at 7 o'clock, was there by 9:15, but that's just a long drive. Yeah. I mean, I think the train would be a little quicker at least.
Yeah, it'll be a 90-minute ride from New Bedford up to South Station. But you know what? You'll be working.
And there's no stopping, really, when you think about it. There's slowdowns because you're picking up things, too, but I think part of the thing is with the traffic is you're stopped in traffic and you're not moving.
No, you're not getting anything done. Just raising your blood pressure level. So,
we are talking with State Representative Paul Schmid here on the Beacon Hill Report for this month, and he is joining us. Lots of talk on Beacon Hill about the Education Reform Act. Yes. I know, though, obviously, that, you know, in some sense, Fall River has the same issues as far as charter schools as New Bedford does, and I believe their funding issues are the same, in that the portion of the money that is or isn't available, depending on who you're asking, is significant in the city's budget. But I would imagine it's different in the Freetown and Westport areas too, because I don't think there's charter schools in either one of those towns.
No, we don't. No, no. So we don't have that wrinkle. And you know, Jim, I'm very much for choice in education, and I think having choice is a good thing. But we have made it difficult for the communities that have charter schools. We have made it difficult for them to budget the remaining district. And initially, when we brought charter schools in, the state said, "Well, we'll reimburse you. You know, you'll for 6 years, beginning with 100%. We'll make up for the funds that have been diverted from the district to go to the charter school." And of course, we haven't met our commitments on that funding. So that has made it difficult.
But the appetite right now seems to be that something will get done. As far as the reform bill itself, it looks like, it just seems there might be momentum up there right now.
Oh, as to funding schools in general, absolutely. I think there is bipartisan agreement that we have a great variation between the education that kids in suburban schools get and the education that kids in the urban schools get. And education really is the basis of everything. My heavens, in some of the suburban schools systems, they feel that to give their kids world-class education, they need to spend $25,000 per student. How much do we spend here in New Bedford? We scratch like hell to spend $14,000 per student. And we have issues down here that they don't have in the suburban schools.
Well, the funny thing too in that,
funding, big issue.
Right. The funny thing too is that's one issue where the Boston representatives are in the same boat as you are. You know, they're talking about the funding issues, the lack of funding there too.
Yes.
Per student, I'm talking.
Yes, although I think I'm right. I think Boston is spending $20,000 per student compared to the $14,000.
Okay.
So they have a higher level of spending, but even so, they are saying we have needs that are not met. We need more funding. So fortunately, right now, the legislature seems to agree that we do need to change the funding system. It's going to require more money. The governor's budget, the House budget, and the Senate budget for 2020 will include a big increase, and we're all calling it a down payment because it doesn't get us to where we need to be. And the big issue is, can we get to where we have to be without an increase in taxes?
But part of, from what I think what I read too was that the budget is the down payment, but the bodies, both branches of government want to take it up after the budget's done. Am I correct on that?
Well, within within the revenues that we have available for next year, we will have a significant increase in funding for education.
Yeah.
But it doesn't get us to where the formula wants to get us.
Okay.
So, what new sources of revenue can we find? And that is going to be a big point of discussion after the budgets are finished. Yeah.
Speaking of education, and you and I were talking about this off camera before the show, reading about the UMass budget, which I know, especially in this neck of the woods, with UMass Dartmouth being so important to families, to people of all ages, UMass saying they need more money. The Senate and the House and the governor, I think all are in agreement on this one. They did theoretically up the budget, at least from what I'm reading, $7 million from the previous year, but the UMass Dartmouth, and maybe I'm paraphrasing, saying, no, it's not an increase, which I don't understand, but okay, it's, you know, where do we go from here, especially in this area where UMass Dartmouth is so important to the economy, to the education of many people? Where do we go? How does this work out?
You're absolutely right. the House budget had a very nice increase for the UMass system.
So it took the governor's plan.
As well, the governor started it.
Yeah.
The House continues it, and I'm sure the Senate will. Is it enough? so that we don't have to have another round of tuition increases. And I think everybody agrees that we can't continue this practice of kids coming out of college with a huge debt hanging around their necks.
Mm-hmm.
It's not good. It keeps them from being able to ultimately buy a home. We need to change that. So, with a nice increase in the budget for UMass this year, how come they can't hold tuition levels to where they are?
And that seems to be a main focus of all three, the governor's office, the House, and the Senate. That seems to be a major issue for them, holding the line on tuition.
Hold tuition. Now, our friends in the UMass system say, yeah, you gave us a nice increase, but that's all used up by the contractual wage increases that we've already agreed to. Not easy.
Why can't, and this is maybe stupid thoughts on my part, but if you brought more, and I don't know what the acceptance level is. I know it's so competitive to get into all the UMass schools anymore. UMass Dartmouth is extremely competitive to get into. But if you increase the class sizes, that would bring more revenue in, I would think. And I don't know if that's a logical answer or anything like that, but if you had more students, would that offset the cost?
Yes, I think it would.
Or do they say, well, we need more professors? And I don't know.
Yeah, so two things on that. I have heard that we're starting to face the demographics, that the number of kids coming out of high schools around the country is diminishing.
Oh, okay.
Apparently, after 9/11, people were a little bit more conservative about starting a family and so on, so that's now working its way through the system, and there are fewer kids applying to the colleges. So, yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, I just see, I know the percentage of kids that apply, and I don't know what it is. It used to be not a lot that got in versus the number applied that got in. It was a pretty good gap. And I always thought, well, if you just took more students, wouldn't that offset financial costs? I know there's got to be a limit, but...
Yeah, well, and all of the UMass system, UMass Dartmouth, Amherst, Boston, and so on, are much more selective than they used to be. You know, it's not an open door. You have to have increasingly higher levels of attainment, which is a good thing.
Right.
It's great.
But the issue for, especially here, is for many people down in this neck of the woods, these are first generation kids going to college, which you don't see in other universities in the other campuses in the system. Yep.
UMass Dartmouth is such an important conduit to the new economy for kids down here in the South Coast.
And it's different too. Well, the issue too is you still got, and I'm assuming that the state schools, state universities, Bridgewater State or wherever, it's about Bridgewater for us, the community college, they're saying, well, we need our money too. I don't know what BCC's enrollment is like, but I know it seems as though it continues to grow every year.
Yes, it does.
So the need, when you're talking about higher ed funding, it's not just the UMass system.
No, it's the university system and the community colleges. Yeah.
So there's a lot going on there with that. Wanted to talk about distracted driving. I know that bill.
Yes.
I've seen that. I think it's been put off for a couple weeks, maybe.
Yeah, I think we're perhaps taking it up day after tomorrow. This is.
Oh, okay.
This is my colleague, Representative Strauss's bill, which he has been pushing forward.
I know the speaker seems to be behind it.
He has gotten on board.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I would imagine it's coming our way. So for me personally, I've got to figure out how to use the telephone without you.
Is there concerns with that legislation? I know it's basically saying you can't use a phone anymore. Hands-free device. It's got to be hands-free. You can't. There's no, that regard. But
so no more driving up Route 24 with one hand on the phone and one hand. Oftentimes, haven't you seen it? One hand on the phone and the other one eating or applying.
Makeup. Yeah,
right.
I've seen that many times. Is there concerns about that bill that you have right now, as it stands?
me personally, other than the fact that I'll have to update my technology in my car. Everything we read is that the phone is a terrible distraction. So, yeah, I think it's something we have to do.
And you think, because I know it's passed the Senate before and it hasn't got through the House, you think the House is going to be, like I said, from what I read, the Speaker seems to be very much for it this time.
Yes.
Is it reworded, rewritten from previously? Are there changes, I guess?
I think it's basically the same bill, but I think, it often takes time. It takes time for a bill to get, as we call it, socialized. You have to getting people's attention. 7,000 bills every 2 years. So getting the Speaker's attention on any one subject and to reflect on it, have his staff look into it, to read it, to understand it. It takes a while. And I think the moment for distracted driving probably has come. And kudos to Representative Strauss for having been behind this.
One other thing I wanted to mention, and this may be way off your radar, but you do serve on the Public Health Committee, the Joint Committee on Public Health. And we've been reading the last, few months about the measles outbreak and the increase in measles. I know Massachusetts is one state that has reported measles. I don't know if that's something that committee's dealt with in the 4 months that the session has started, but I'm curious as to, I don't know if there's something the state could do from a legislative point about people having their kids get the measles shots or something like that. 20 years ago it seemed like this was eradicated, and now there's an outbreak.
Yes, because there are many people, I think less so in Massachusetts, but around the country there are pockets of people who, for one reason or another, do not want to see their kids vaccinated. And this creates an enormous health problem. We have had some measles reported in Massachusetts, but it hasn't risen to the level of an epidemic. And of course, we don't want it.
No. And that's why I'm wondering, is that issue something that it starts at the committee level? I know that something that can be legislated at all?
Well, it may be, but because so far it's been relatively confined in Massachusetts, we haven't, to my knowledge, that hasn't come to be an issue of priority for the Public Health Committee. We may see a change, though. If these trends continue, we'll certainly hear more about it.
Yeah, I would imagine that committee's things spring up in the health committee that 5 months ago may not have been there, and now they're there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have wonderful committee assignments.
Yep.
Revenue, public health, ways and means,
right,
and redistricting.
And the redistricting, is that for 2020 with the census, right?
Well, it'll be in 2021 based on the 2020 census, and it'll be for the 2022 election cycle.
Okay.
Yes.
So we'll talk about that more too. I want to thank you for coming in.
Jim, I really enjoyed it.
If my math is correct, your next time will be November, as we keep doing this in the alphabetical order that it is. You will be right near the end of the year.
Well, you can count on me in November, and we'll have lots to talk about by then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, I've really enjoyed this.
It's a busy time for you, I know that, so I thank you for coming in.
My pleasure.
All right.
Great.
That's going to do it for this edition of the Beacon Hill Report. I'm Jim Marshall, and we will talk to you again next month. Thank you.